Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another spring showcase. I think we're on showcase number 24 now, so we've got quite a few of these that have happened. And it's really great to see the team coming together today to share about the Paradigm Club project. So we've got South Stats, United Utilities and SME Water going to share their experience with us. Welcome to all who've joined us. Welcome to all from UK and Ireland. We've also got a great group of international people on the call today as well. We've got Spain, Netherlands, Australia, South Africa. So welcome to all of those who are joining us from overseas as well. Hope these sharing sessions are really helpful for you as well. So for anybody who doesn't know, my name is Carly Perry, Managing Director of Spring Innovation. We are the Innovation Centre of Excellence for the UK and Ireland water sector. So we are supported by all 18 water companies, and we are here to enable collaboration and remove duplication of efforts that happens around innovation. We also want to be accelerating adoption of innovation, and these sessions are one of the beginning steps to help accelerate adoption. So Spring was created in 2021, and we have a few service offerings that I wanted to share with you. One thing that we base as our foundation is the Water Innovation Strategy. So that document was created in 2020, and that lists all the ambitions for the sector. So there's over 200 ambitions in that document. It's hosted on our website, and the team will pop links into the chat for you. But in that document, there are themes, 7 themes. And it ranges from providing services society needs and expects, all the way through to enabling future diverse, ready people. This particular showcase today relates to a couple of themes, so delivering resilient infrastructure and also providing services society needs and expects. But if you're interested in knowing more about what the priority problems are in the UK and Ireland sector, I really recommend going and having a look at that document. But this is our knowledge sharing service offering, and there's a number of layers to this service offering where we want to help accelerate learning across the sector. So we have an open platform that anybody can register and have access to. There are case studies on that platform, and those case studies share the experience of those who have trodden before you with innovation projects about the lessons they've learned, the challenges they came across and how they overcame the problems. There's about 60 case studies there at the moment. We've got about 200 case studies in the pipeline that we're busy trying to get written and get uploaded there. But you can search by themes so that you can go and learn from what others have experienced there. We also have the showcases. These are 2-hour sessions where we get water companies and suppliers to present together about their experience of solving a particular priority problem. These sessions ultimately are here to help you learn so that you can then go and embed these lessons into your business. So we do put polls out, we do surveys to find out what you're going to do with this knowledge, how you're going to embed it, and we want to follow that journey through to make sure the knowledge is applied and we are actually accelerating learning in the sector. When it comes to knowledge sharing, though, there is also a vision and best practice principles that we have been building with Ofwat. And we have been partnering with Ofwat because we both actually have ambitions around building a better culture of knowledge sharing. We're going to be publishing those vision and best practice principles in the coming months, but we have worked with all innovation teams from all 18 water companies. We have worked with senior leaders across the sector as well to create a vision to unlock faster adoption through knowledge sharing. And the best practice principles include things like knowledge sharing should start from the beginning of a project, not at the end of a project. It includes things like we want to share failures as well as successes. So keep an eye out for those principles that we will be publishing soon, but Spring is here to support the sector to deliver best practice knowledge sharing. So we're an enabler to help that happen. And our service offering, where we work with water companies who've submitted bids into the Ofwat fund, helps them to make sure they are delivering against those requirements. So with that in mind, what I wanted to do was just share a little bit more about today's session. And I wanted to walk you through the agenda quickly. So in a minute, I'm going to introduce you to the speakers. We're going to give a little bit more about the importance of knowledge sharing in the sector as well. Talk about the need for change. Talk about the project itself. So what is it? How does it work? And what are the benefits and the leakage strategy? There'll be a whole piece around implementing. As I've said, we want to accelerate adoption. So we want to share as many lessons we can about how you can implement this solution. We'll have a break, we'll go into some more lessons learned, and then we'll have a Q&A session with all of our speakers today. So make sure you're tapping your questions away, and the team here will facilitate those to the speakers. So we'll get straight to it. So the speakers we've got today, we've got Moomin from South Staffs Water, who's the head of innovation. We've got Philip from South Staffs Water, head of leakage. Courtney from United Utilities, who is leakage technical manager. And we've got Stuart from SME Water, the managing director. Huge thank you to all of our speakers and everybody involved in today's event. Huge thank you to all of you for coming along. I think we've got about 100 people on the call, so it's great to see so many of you interested in this topic. So I will hand over to Moomin, who's going to share a little bit more about the importance of knowledge sharing.
Thank you, Carly. And it's great to see so many people on the call. As you'll be aware, I mean, the Offwater Innovation Fund was released a few years ago, and it's fantastic
Moomin,
to see.
I think you're...
Can you not hear me?
Sorry, bear with me. Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, yeah. Perfect.
Okay, I'll speak louder if I need to, just shout.
No problem.
I was just saying, with the release of the Offwater Innovation Fund, it's fantastic to see so many different projects, initiatives, pilots, and really pushing the boundaries in the sector. But without sufficient knowledge sharing, it's very difficult to realize all those benefits. So my first point, if we can go to the next slide, please. Knowledge sharing, I believe, is one of the cornerstones for driving innovation and realizing all those benefits at scale. So it's so important that we can share that knowledge with the sector. It really does help uncover some new opportunities. It promotes collaboration, and it avoids others reinventing the wheel. And that's such an important point. How many times have we seen across in the sector, people almost duplicating efforts, whether it's a smart meter trial or behaviour change campaign, etc. And it's really important that we understand what's out there first before we start delivering a new initiative. And that's important for us as well. We're a small water only company. We don't have a large innovation function or team like some of the bigger companies. Hence, we are sometimes a fast follower when it comes to innovation, and we're keen to see what's out there so we can build those efficiencies and then plan going forward. And hence, I think efficiency is a key one for knowledge sharing, but also transparency. We know the sector are, the spotlight's on them at the moment, whether it's on the wastewater side or some of the failings we see across the sector. But at the same time, we're doing some amazing stuff. We need to be shouting about it and sharing more about what we're doing. So transparency, building trust with our customers is going to be really important as well when it comes to knowledge sharing. And also when we talk about value, it's not just within the water sector. Some of the stuff that we're seeing, that value goes beyond the sector. When we talk about vulnerable customers or, working with different types of customers from different communities, etc. One of the projects I'm leading, we learn so much insight that can be used beyond our sector, which is great to see. And as Carly mentioned, Spring, it's a fresh, breath of fresh air when Spring joined, and have been a real enabler for some of this stuff. And a massive thank you to Spring to hosting this event today. And I do really see them as a key enabler to unlocking some of that value, but also creating that best practice knowledge sharing culture that we so need in the industry. My last couple of points really is, I think overall we're making some great strides when it comes to knowledge sharing, but we still need to do more. And it's really important that we share the right level of intelligence. Sometimes we can have a knowledge sharing session like today, and maybe it's not enough for you to, what does that mean next for you as an organization or individual? So it's important we share enough that you can help, whether it's embedding that knowledge or making the right decisions internally. And there's a whole cultural shift, and Carly mentioned this earlier around, we really need to share what hasn't worked, replace the word failure with learning. So we've got to be more open about what's worked, what's not. And some of these innovations, we know they're not all of them are not going to work. There are going to be some failures. So it's important that we share that knowledge with the rest of the sector. So yeah, welcome your feedback today in terms of how what we're sharing is, if it's useful or not, and what we could do better. Last point, before I pass it on, just a bit of context for today. One of the biggest challenges, as many of you know, we face in the sector is managing the demand for water. So water companies pretty much know exactly how much we put into the network, But the $1 million question is, where is that water going? You know, how much of it is household consumption? How much of it is non-households? How much of it is leakage? And it's great to see the work that Paradigm are doing in terms of trying to understand the unaccounted for water and better understand leakage. And I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to pass it over to the team to continue. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Phil Roberts. I am head of leakage at South Water, and I just wanted to give a quick sort of overview of why we need this. And I think Moomin said it pretty well there in terms of what we need to do and how we need to do it and the problem. And I've just put a little graph up here to sort of highlight the issues. This comes straight from our Cambridge Water region and our WRMP. It's a bit of a complex graph, but the blue line is essentially our total water we'll have available for use, dropping through the years with abstraction. And the green line at the top is our total demand plus target headroom. And you can see they're moving further and further apart. You can see in the middle, we've got the light blue is household demand, then you've got unmeasured household consumption, non-measured non-household consumption, and then other components. You can see that we're getting further and further away from that as we go all the way through to 2099, and over the next 10-15 years we're going to have some real problems we're going to have to solve, and this is something that we hope Paradigm's going to help us with, and already is. So if I go to the next slide, again, this was last year. We had one of the highest Junes of all time. You can see there, this is our whole region in South Staffs. Minimum night flows going up. You can see the Ramadan increase, then it comes back down for sort of the milder May period, and then we had really hot June, and then it drops down again. And trying to understand this, firstly at a regional level, I think we've got a pretty good understanding in terms of our allowances and our household night use and non-household night use and all of that stuff works pretty well. But on a DMA to DMA and sub-DMA level, the understanding just isn't there. And that's where we wanted to be able to see those issues and really try and understand them, and that's what Paradigm's helping us do. I will pass on to Courtney.
Hi, I'm Courtney Connor, Leakage Technical Manager at United Utilities. So really one of our biggest challenges is actually our size. So we are the water provider here in the Northwest, and we serve approximately 7 million customers, 3.2 million homes and households. If you think of the water network as a giant jigsaw puzzle, we have about a 3,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, but each piece is discrete but interlocking with the next. So our challenge is, how do we actually monitor, analyse and then action appropriately all of those pieces of the jigsaw puzzle? So our ratio of leakage analysts to the numbers of DMAs and district metered areas that they need to monitor can sometimes be a challenge. Also kind of the overall leakage management wheel, which at times is rewarding, at times is frustrating, but it's always relentless. So you are on this constant hamster wheel. Hi everybody, welcome back. Sorry about that, we had some minor technical issues at this event. Clearly the internet in the Northwest isn't as good as the water provider. So I'm not sure where we got to on the slide, but hopefully I was talking about the size of the challenge here at United Utilities, and that we have a complex water network, a 3,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. In terms of what we need to do, leakage management is at times really rewarding, at times it's really frustrating, but it is relentless. We are on this constant hamster wheel of monitoring and actioning appropriately. Another big challenge that we have is that actually some of our long-standing and long-serving leakage analysts are leaving the business, and it's a fairly high turnover role. So every time we lose someone, we lose that knowledge and that skill set. Our size and the fact that our leakage analysts do move on means that it can be really difficult to ensure consistent analysis and decision making, which is obviously vital to our success.
Let's just talk a little bit about the club project and where we started. So 2 years ago, we met with a number of water companies, with United Utilities, South Staffs, and Anglian Water and Severn Trent. And up to that point, we'd been, at SME Water, have been developing our paradigm analysis. And at that point, it was a spreadsheet analysis. So you take all the information you want for a DMA, you put it into a spreadsheet, someone would turn the handle on it, we'd go around, we'd then come out with these results, we'd go and investigate it. The problem with that is that You then go off, you fix your problems, and then you go and do your next DMA, your next DMA. By the time you come back round full circle, you've got new problems you didn't even realise were there. So we sat down with the water companies and we said, look, we want to take what we've got at the moment, which is a kind of a turnaround spreadsheet, and we want to automate this. We want this to become fully automated. So every week it's pulling data in, every week it's turning it over, it's giving the analysis. So analysts are getting that in real time. And then we can look at what are the problems with our DMAs, how can we improve them, but then have something monitoring the background to make sure that if we have a data problem or an integrity problem or a leakage problem with the DMA, it's immediately flagged up so the analysts know what they're looking at. So the key aim of that project was to help leakage analysts separate what's leakage and what's demand on the water network. So how do we understand when we're looking at a graph that's changed this morning, is that because it was really hot or something, or a customer's changed how they're using water, or is it actually leakage? How can we send people out to then target that with confidence? And also make sure we're developing best practice and sharing knowledge and DMA analysis. So how across an industry can we make sure we're keeping those skills, keeping that knowledge and putting those processes? Forward on to a couple of years, and we've now grown the project. So back in October, Thames Water and Yorkshire Water also joined with South Staffs and Severn Trent. We've been expanding into their other companies, so into Cambridge Water and into HD in Wales. And then earlier this year, South West Water also came on board. So we've got a big group of companies now, and we cover 70% of properties within England within the analysis. So 70% of the demand going to properties in England is coming through our analysis and helping us to learn and improve. We're now going to go on to a short video, which will tell you a bit more about what Paradigm is, and we'll get to hear some case studies and hear from some of the club members who aren't here to join us today.
Hello, I'm Stuart Mordett. Welcome to SME Water and our Spring Showcase.
For the past few years, we have been driving change in the water industry. Rather than focusing on developing fancy AI tools to emulate and replace analysts, we've instead been looking at how we can empower them by providing proper training and support, focusing on their day-to-day challenges. This has resulted in the development of Paradigm, a simple analysis tool that allows them to make the right decisions for their areas, and the Paradigm Academy, which provides training, case studies, and reference material to support their ongoing development. The Paradigm project is allowing analysts to separate, for the first time, what's really leakage on their water networks and what's actually customer demand and data anomalies, ensuring we promote the right solution in the right place. The right solution in the right place approach simply means expert leakage teams are doing what they do best, looking for leaks in areas with a leakage problem, whilst demand, network and data investigations are carried out in areas where it's not a leakage problem. This allows analysts to direct the expert resource they have at their disposal into the areas where they can have the best benefit, and ensures we don't waste time chasing data anomalies around our networks. The Paradigm Club project has brought together some of the most forward-thinking water companies in our industry to share their knowledge and expertise so that we can meet the challenges we are facing together. While many in the industry are looking at innovative inventions and game-changing technologies, we at SME Water think this innovation can come from believing in our people, sharing knowledge and improving our partnerships and collaboration. For today's session, we're going to look at how Paradigm creates model profiles for DMAs and the Paradigm rating system, before taking a deeper dive into some case studies of Paradigm in action and a bit more detail around the Paradigm Academy and the user interface. Before we start talking about Paradigm, let's look at some of the building blocks that we use in our industry to help us target leakage. In the UK, we use DMAs to allow us to understand how water is moving around our networks. DMA stands for District Metered Area, with DMAs forming a hydraulically discrete area of our distribution network. We can create DMAs by designing our water networks to form separate areas and by closing valves on the network to keep them separate. We call these closed valves DMA boundary valves, as they form a boundary between adjacent areas. This means that all water flowing in or out of a DMA can be measured using flow meters, also at the boundary. We create a net flow for an area by subtracting the sum of the outlet meters from the sum of the inlet meters, and we use this net flow to understand whether there is leakage in an area. Flow data in the UK is typically sampled at 15-minute intervals, giving us 96 values per day. On screen, you can see a typical diurnal flow profile for a household DMA, with consumption low at night time when customers are sleeping and increasing in the morning as customers wake and get ready to leave the house. This consumption drops again during the day when people are at school or work, before increasing again in the evening when they return home. By taking metered or estimated customer demand away from the net flow into an area, we can understand where we could be missing water on our network, which could be leakage. Now we're going to look at how Paradigm supports analysts in the analysis of their DMAs by building an expected model profile for each area. This profile is forecast for 365 days a year, taking into account expected customer demand variation for things like weekday, weekend demand changes, school and university term times, and religious events like Ramadan. We are continually working with the Paradigm users to identify areas for improvement and developing the model in the background to get as close a fit as possible to actual customer behaviour. Let's take a look at the key components we use to build the demand analysis in Paradigm. We start with a background leakage estimation using the mains length and properties in a DMA. This assumes that there is a level of leakage which can't be affected in a sustainable way by leakage detection activities. This is something the industry is working to understand more, so watch this space. To this we add our household consumption profile. This profile uses open source census data to classify properties in the area into our property groups, with a number of factors, including occupancy and socio-economic factors, applied to get an overall shape and volume. Non-household data is then applied, with consumptions profiled to consider typical repeated patterns, for example, weekday, weekend profiles, as well as seasonal changes in demand. Any continuously logged customers are shown separately, with estimated data used if the actual data for this customer is not available. This gives us an overall model profile for the area. By comparing this against the total net flow going into an area, we can calculate the unaccounted for water. Analysis of the shape and volume of this unaccounted for water allows us to start to understand whether an area makes sense and, if not, what the possible issues could be. This gives analysts confidence to progress with on-site investigations. In this example, we can see that the unaccounted for water shows some variation across the day, being lower at night and higher in the day. This would suggest that it's not leakage, which would look like a continuous flow, and the area could be missing customer demand, or there might be a problem with the data or the integrity of the DMA, perhaps an open boundary valve allowing water to pass into a neighbouring area. This insight is a great starting point for analysts in helping them to ensure valuable leakage resources are only sent to DMAs with actual leakage problems. In this case, we would wait to send leakage teams into this area until we had checked for a data issue, metering problem, or an open boundary valve. With 16,000 DMAs across the club project, there are lots of examples of areas that fit brilliantly to the model. When something changes, these models can be used to identify emerging issues, whether it's a trigger to crack on with some leakage investigations, or to hit pause and delve deeper into the data to hunt out for any gremlins that might be distorting our view of the truth. But how do analysts know that they can trust what Paradigm is saying about their areas? And what happens if the model isn't a great fit to start with? Working together with the analysts, we have developed a simple 0 to 5-star rating system to help analysts understand how confident they can be in the model that Paradigm is presenting to them. This looks at how well the model profile for an area has fit the net flow into the DMA in the past. This considers 3 main factors: the shape of the profile, the range of the profile, and the overall volume of flow. Let's start with a 5-star DMA. This is where Paradigm has a high level of confidence in the model that has been created. In this example, you can see that both the model profile and net flow profile have the same overall shape, range, and volume. A 4-star rating is used where the profiles share a similar shape and range of flow, but there is a volume change, creating a continuous offset to the graph. This suggests that there is a continuous flow in the DMA above the expected model profile and could indicate historic leakage. Until this is resolved, we can't have full confidence in the area. 2- and 3-star ratings suggest that we have some level of confidence in a DMA based on the shape, but the range of flow doesn't match well. This would typically indicate that we are missing demand from our model, maybe a new housing estate in the area which isn't updated in GIS, so is missing from our model. Or there could be problems with the DMA's boundary integrity, an open valve allowing more water into the area, or a faulty meter not capturing flows well. Finally, our one-star DMAs tell us that the model profile doesn't match the net flow into an area for shape, range or volume, giving no confidence that the area is operating correctly and is well modelled. This rating system gives analysts a measure of confidence in the data they are seeing on the graph and allows them to either press on with analysis or pause to consider whether the data in front of them is a true reflection of the area before sending valuable field resources to look for an issue. Now we're going to take a look at some recent case studies where Paradigm has helped Severn Trent Water and Yorkshire Water identify anomalies on their water networks. This case study in Severn Trent Water illustrates how Paradigm identified a DMA displaying integrity issues that was causing inaccuracies in the net flow. In this example, the issue resulted in apparent losses of approximately 230 metres cubed per day being reported on the upstream network. As the graph shows, the Paradigm analysis is indicating that the expected model demand for this DMA is not being met by the actual net flow being recorded. This is an indication of integrity issues being present. The Paradigm rating for this particular model is 2-star, which implies that long-term integrity issues have prevented the net flow meeting the expected demand historically. Analyst investigations were required to understand the root cause of the issue and determine the appropriate next steps to resolve, whether that be resolving on-site integrity issues with the boundary or meters, or reviewing the constituent parts of the DMA to ensure demand is being allocated correctly. In this case, Severn Trent Water have a meter installed on the upstream network which directly monitors the section of trunk mains from a service reservoir to DMA 15636. The discrepancy between the upstream meter and the feed into DMA 15636 was leading to apparent losses being reported on this section of the upstream network. This corroborates with Paradigm that an issue could be present with the integrity of the DMA and the net flow being recorded not being sufficient enough for the demand associated. Severn Trent's investigations led to the inlet meter for the DMA being replaced, resulting in a more accurate net flow being recorded, which subsequently fits with the expected model profile and Paradigm. In addition to matching the expected flows out of the upstream trunk main section, Paradigm now assess this DMA to be behaving as expected and will continually monitor the performance over time before upgrading it to a 5-star rating and give the analyst confidence in their DMA. In this case study, as part of the trial rollout for Yorkshire Water, Paradigm assisted in the identification of 170 metres cubed per day of leakage within DMA A073. During the first week of the trial rollout in Sheffield, Paradigm had identified leakage issues with DMA A073 due to the net flow showing approximately 2 litres per second above the expected model profile. Although there are minor alignment offsets between the model and the actual net flow, the unaccounted for water was continuous enough for Paradigm to flag for leakage investigations. Paradigm has also provided a 5-star rating for this DMA, which gives confidence to the analyst that the leakage is recoverable, as the 5-star rating is indicating that the net flow has matched the model well historically. On the back of Paradigm flagging the DMA for leakage investigations, Yorkshire Water planned and conducted a step test to narrow down the location of the leak, which led to a burst being found and subsequently repaired. Once the repair was made, the net flow for the DMA matched the Paradigm model much more closely, providing the evidence and confidence to the team that there was no further leakage to be targeted in the DMA, and their efforts and resources could be focused elsewhere. Hopefully those case studies have brought to life the benefits of using Paradigm to the analysts. Now we're going to have a look at how we have developed the Paradigm Academy and Paradigm user interface to ensure analysts get the most out of it. While the user interface is where Paradigm's models are put to use, the Academy is where we have captured the accumulated learning of the project and reproduced it as a training resource. Building the user's knowledge from the ground up, we ensure that everyone can benefit from Paradigm's analysis, no matter their level of experience. In this way, we have provided a resource that is not just useful to a new user of Paradigm, but also to a more general knowledge base that can be referred back to as a refresher for old hands. The Academy is designed to build the user's knowledge for a logical progression of topics. building first from core concept courses, which explain the basics of DMAs and what Paradigm does, through to a course group that provides more specific knowledge of key subjects such as Ramadan and factors affecting household use. And then on to look at key analysis areas, focusing on how to investigate the issues of leakage and integrity. Because we know that different people learn in different ways, the Academy contains a range of resources from articles and videos through to interactive graphics, case study presentations and quizzes. The District Metered Areas course is the first of 3 core concept courses, which are designed to ensure that a user of Paradigm has all the most basic information available to them to allow them to use the product. Clicking into the course, we can see that District Metered Areas consists of 4 modules and is supported by an article that is stored in the easily accessible library. Once a user has been through all 4 modules, they are given a quick multiple choice test to complete, to ensure they have picked up the key points of learning in the course. Users are awarded badges for successfully completed courses, which allows their progress through the Academy to be tracked. This has been especially useful in the early stages of our rollout, as we've been able to determine who has completed their learning and is ready to receive their user interface login credentials. In this way, users of the Academy are led through the available courses, moving from developing a basic understanding of DMAs and Paradigm's utility through to topics including Ramadan, and then delving into the topic of leakage and the Palm framework. If at any point the user wants to return to the Academy and find relevant information quickly, the fastest route is to perhaps use the library and its stored articles. Each course in the Academy has an associated article with quick navigation menu to assist in finding specific information quickly rather than sifting through a whole module video. Now let's take a look at the Paradigm user interface itself. The core design philosophy of the interface has been to keep things as simple as possible, while providing users with all the information they need to make informed decisions and prioritize their workload. Let's have a look at some examples of emerging issues in Paradigm. On screen is an example of an emerging issue in a Paradigm DMA. Where previously the area's net flow had been a good match for its model, we can see, as we start to scroll across, that the flow moves further and further away from the expected profile. In our next example, we can see again that the flow starts off as a good match with the model until demand appears to drop around May 12th. Both of these issues were automatically highlighted for analysts to review. Paradigm and the Academy are the result of several years of work alongside our partners in the Club project. They offer simple and effective new tools that grant analysts the ability to review DMA flows with reference to past performance, as well as providing a learning resource that mitigates against the risk of job knowledge being lost as part of normal staff turnover. Not only that, through collaboration with these water companies, we have created a process for investigating long-standing issues that have been highlighted by Paradigm, empowering analysts to investigate with confidence and efficiency. This efficiency translates into the right teams being placed in the right areas at the right time, saving our partners time and money. We're really proud to have put Paradigm on the map and are pleased to see it delivering benefit to more and more clients. Let's hear from some of our other club members who weren't able to join us here today.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's about the way that we've worked together on the solution. So this is not something that's being forced upon us or being dictated to us. It's something that we've worked together on, and therefore we feel engaged in the end result as well. So we're kind of in it together.
So for me, I think it's around coming together as an industry. The collaboration between the different companies is really good. Coming here, sharing thoughts, sharing ideas. I've definitely taken things away from these working groups. So all about collaboration for me.
The response in the organisation has been really positive. Now, I mentioned about a journey, and we're still going off from the big beginning of that journey, but we're already starting to use that as part of our weekly and monthly planning and tactical escalation calls. Whether it's an analyst or a field operations manager, we're all sort of trying to think about, well, what does that data provide? And the reality is that there's lots of data that feeds into the Paradigm model. So it's, again, just about more insight and ultimately better decisions as a result.
I mean, our leakage inspectors often go around to DMA and say, it's not leakage, it's consumption. And our analysts sometimes find that a difficult concept to challenge. And what the product gives them is the confidence to send a leakage inspector into a DMA and say, no, there's a leak in there. And that's an excellent solution. I feel like the leakage inspectors are on board with it too.
The response to Paradigm has been pretty positive. Well, very positive, actually, I would say. I think that starts with the pre-pilot planning that we did with SME. SME had made available the Paradigm Academy. The Paradigm Academy, I think, really explained what the components and the outputs of the Paradigm dashboard are. And this made it very easy for the end users, like the targeting analysts, to use. And then also it's been positive, I think, because SME Water have been very engaged from the beginning through the pre-pilot planning and through the pilot delivery. They've been hands-on throughout with a weekly meeting that has been a success so far.
This is probably one of the most engaged trials we've actually delivered at Yorkshire Water. The concept is really simple. The analysts, team leaders, engineers, and leakage inspectors are really on board with the solution.
I think the way it's been done is really good. Having these sessions on a regular basis, already planned in for a year's worth of work, you kind of know what's going to happen. There's a very clear aim, clear vision. The way it's split out into the technical aspect and then the strategic aspect, I think is really good. I think it's really good. I think we've got access to you guys on an individual basis, coming into the business and doing sort of one-to-one sessions or close sessions as well as the industry sessions is really good.
So I think the way that Paradigm and SME Water have delivered this project compared to other ones is just the very nature of the club project, coming together with other water companies, having the user groups, and coming together to find that best practice and the sort of the industry standard for leakage investigation and analysis has been quite refreshing and interesting to be a part of.
So the approach from SME has been really positive and encouraging for the journey that we go through for the future. It's really easy just to come up with a new system and then give that to teams and expect that things will just magically happen. But the reality is that change is difficult. There's cultures, there's people, there are things that need support. So the reality is, when we think about the setup we've got, Stuart, yourself, the team, we have regular touch points to review progress. We're challenged by Stuart to make sure that the data is in the right place at the right time. And reality is that we do need that.
On the shop floor support, you're always there 7 days a week if you need to. But yeah, the collaboration that you're giving, the feedback we're giving to you, and the improvements that you're making as well, it's really good. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I hope you enjoyed our video. Now we're going to talk through some of the benefits that we've seen from Paradigm and look at how it fits into the strategy across South Staffs and United Utilities. I'll hand over to Bill, who's going to talk a bit about South Staffs.
Yeah, we've just got a few case studies that we undertook and found some real benefit from across the 4 work streams that you just talked through there. Case study number 1 was in a DMA called D315. This was one where Paradigm put into a leakage work stream. So we took that away and looked at it. Basically, this is the graph you're looking at here. The orange is the Paradigm flows, and then the blue is our actual flows. And you can see there that the blue flow is consistently above the orange Paradigm flow, and therefore it got placed in the leakage work stream. So possible issues that would be in this DMA probably leakage, but there could also be maybe some continuous and measured flow. So because it went in the, sorry, I had a problem then. There we go. Because it went in the leakage work stream, we sent out leakage teams in there. I think I keep accidentally pressing. There we go. That might not be the Sorry. That might not be the clicker. So we went out, we found 4 custom side leaks in total. You can see there where we've isolated all 4, and it brings it basically all the way down to the line where it should be. So it sort of validates what that was saying. Do it carefully. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, did I go back? And you can see there, once they've been repaired, there's still one to repair there, a particular tricky CSL that we're having problems with. And you can see from where it's from, so we're still having problems with it. But you can see it basically come back down to where it should be. That, I believe, came out of the leakage work stream and into maintain, even though there's a little bit there. Probably not worth us going out, it's probably a bigger fish to fry. So yeah, it really did sort of validate that whole process that we went through. And then, as has been said previously and on the video, sort of gives confidence to the analysts and the leakage inspectors as well to say, yes, that was correct, therefore we trust it moving forward. So yeah, in that process, the analysis was done, went into the leakage work stream. The on-site investigations therefore got pushed through. Leakage technicians located and quantified the bursts. Repairs were undertaken, and therefore leakage was identified, and we got 14 cube an hour worth of leakage benefit there. Onto the second case study I'm going to go through, which is more of a demand case study. This one was in a DMA called D637, and what we basically found was that the customer meter wasn't properly in the billing system, and we managed to push that all the way through. So if I go through that, again, orange is there predicted flows, and then blue is the real flow. And you can see that at weekends, so that 12th and 13th of August is the weekend, and you can see it actually matches up pretty well. Saturday probably a little higher, and then Sunday matched up perfectly. And then during the week, it's really high during the day and matches up pretty nicely at night time, which again sort of indicates it's not leakage, it's something else. And looking at that profile, you can sort of assume that it's non-household demand, as it's very variable and through the week. And again, without seeing that, it wouldn't be as clear. So without just seeing the fact that there's the predicted flows and there's the actual flows, you wouldn't be able to quickly determine, right, that's going to be a household or non-household issue. Now let's look at the parameters in the DMA and move forward from there. So we quickly identified it was probably missing non-household demand. So we did a couple of studies in terms of what we wanted it to be.
Sorry.
And basically we found, within our system, we found a property that was doing that. So if I go to the next one, that black line is a property we found that we already knew about, was sort of hidden away in our billing system, not properly being accounted for as it should be. So we had to bring that into the DMA. And just by looking at the black line, you can see that it matched up really well. And then the next line, which I think we've already ruined by pressing too many times, you can see that once you add that black line in and that property in, the DMA flows match up almost perfectly. Yes, it's still spiky, but that's just the nature of the DMA. I think it's a relatively small DMA with non-household demand in it, but it matched up really, really well, and it enabled us to report that accurately and help us target accurately as well. And that was actually worth 39k to the business. Now, like I said, it was already in the billing system, but it was sort of hidden away. We just needed to bring it to the fore, and it helped us identify that really well. So again, there, just to go through the process, the analysis was done. The analyst confirmed that work stream saying it was non-household. We went out and surveyed the area, found the property, logged it because it wasn't being logged before, so we could get actual flows, not just a read. Got that into the net, got that into the system and into our reporting, and then it went through to that revenue piece of 39k. So again, it highlights that yes, there's leakage there, which was the first example, but the second example, if it's not all leakage, there's loads of other stuff out there and loads of other possibilities it could be. And because you can split the work streams up, it really helps identify that. And just an overall strategy piece for me, as you can see from those two examples there, and there were plenty of others, you can get tangible benefits in the short term, which are fine leakage, fine demand. But in the long term, they obviously separate those different types of problem and get visibility of issues. And basically, it allows you to deploy the right solution in the right place. And not just that, but understand the size of that problem across your network. So what you're able to do is say, okay, there are 35 DMAs with that problem, and there are 70 DMAs with that problem, and we're able to split that up. And especially as we've just had draft determination and plans for AMP8 that we're all doing, how are we going to tackle leakage? And you saw at the start, you know, we've got a very, very stark leakage issue, or unaccountable water issue, I'll call it, that we need to solve going forward to 2050 of 1.5 leakage. So what we need to do is really get underneath that and say, okay, if I spend X amount over here, I'm going to get that benefit, and it helps us to build that up. Helps us to understand where we need to focus on demand problems as well as leakage issues. And again, the right solution might be smart metering or void investigations rather than just leakage targeting. So I can sit with my directors and say, I don't need 10 more leakage technicians. I actually need X amount of meters, or people's going to void inspections, all that sort of stuff. And it really gives you that evidence to build a business case to apply different solutions to. So we can improve reported leakage. And again, to be able to say it might be data, it might be demand, and build and fully fund those strategies. So I'm heavily using this to try and influence my metering counterparts. We've got a big metering strategy for next AMP where we've got to put, I wish I knew the number now. We've got to put an awful lot of meters in the next AMP, and we need to in order to solve our demand issues. And I'm saying, well, we should start in these areas that Paradigm is suggesting, because Paradigm's saying this is an integrity DMA with probable household demand issues. And then you look and you see that actually they're not metered. So let's meter those properties, solve that issue, and then we can move forward and say, now we know where all the water goes, what's the leakage and what's not. And that's how I see it helping us in the future. Like, it's already started to help us as well. And on the back of that, I will hand over to Courtney.
So, okay, so here at United Utilities, we have an ethos to work smarter, not harder. Sorry, just bear with us. The slides jumping all over the place. Okay, sorry, we're back where we need to be. So yeah, the ethos is to work smarter, not harder. And that's really important given the environment that which we're operating in, and the fact that we are chasing increasingly more challenging targets. So the first part of the problem is understanding. So the need to ensure we truly understand our DMAs and then take the right action is critical. We need to be able to distinguish, as we've said, between physical leakage and data leakage, and how much of each of those is at play within our DMAs. So without that understanding, we can't take the right action to improve reported leakage and reduce physical leakage. And there is a distinction between those two things. That then allows us to ask questions, or should I say Paradigm allows us to ask questions. So these are really important questions that we need to ask of our DMAs. Do they make sense? Can we trust their calculated leakage? Do we have the correct targets? And are they displaying physical and/or data leakage? That then leads us to take the right action. So validation that calculated leakage at DMA level is prone to this margin of error or variability, means that we can start to make better decisions and more informed decisions. So if we've been over or underestimating demand at DMA level, then we've been under or overestimating leakage. As a result of that, we've repeatedly gone in some DMAs looking for physical leakage when there isn't any. And then on the other side, there are DMAs that we haven't targeted because we didn't think there was physical leakage in there. When you've only got resource that maybe covers at a max 6 to 7% of your DMAs at any one time, that big jigsaw puzzle that I talked about earlier, then you really need to make sure that you're putting your resource into the right pieces of the puzzle to get results. The Paradigm is absolutely something that's helping us to work smarter, not harder. Stuart's laughing because he doesn't like animation. So I know that would have really annoyed him. I put that in last minute. Okay, so just a little bit more about validation at DMA level. And Phil touched on this earlier. In terms of targeting, and we're at United Utilities realising that we need to move away from targeting DMAs that are operable with an unproven difference from target. Operability is still important, but it's quite a crude test of the validity even of the data. So we are using Paradigm to help establish baselines for each DMA, which means we can then target them with confidence. That then allows us, as I referenced before, to make better use of our finite detection resource. We need to be more effective with the resources that we have to get more results from them. We need to make sure that we're deploying them into the right DMAs where they're able to locate physical leakage, and enough physical leakage to warrant them going into that DMA over a different DMA. That's then going to get us better results. So we are now in the process of bringing in weekly paradigm insights into our analysis, helping us to prioritise the DMAs for detection based on the level of confidence that we have that the DMA is actually displaying physical leakage. Proving DMAs means that we can validate minimum night flows, and we can set appropriate leakage targets. So we're not chasing after a fantasy of a number that we once had. We really understand what's happening, and we're making the best decisions we can to get the best results we can. The bigger paradigm picture for us is about proving our DMAs against the paradigm model. So we're aiming for a fleet of 5-star DMAs, which means we understand our DMAs and we've proven them against paradigm. That means we can then manage them with confidence. So target and reduce the physical leakage that we have. Manage proven DMAs when they then deviate in the future, because I said before, leakage management is a hamster wheel that is relentless and you will always be going back into DMAs. Effectively prioritise those DMAs for detection and then maximise the return that we get from our finite detection resource. The next part of the bigger paradigm picture is about tackling issues that we didn't actually know we had. So we have DMAs that have unapparent issues, and they are operable. And in the past, we would have targeted them. Even though perhaps we maybe had insight that it maybe wasn't leakage, we would always send detection resource in there just in case. So Paradigm's helping us to do a more thorough assessment of our DMAs, supporting better leakage and overall network management. Physical and/or data integrity issues reduce our confidence in the calculated leakage, which is explaining why perhaps we're not always getting the results we expect when we go into DMAs to do detection. The whole point of understanding these issues and having that level of insight means that we can resolve them, improve our targeting, and drive improved results. The final part of kind of the paradigm bigger picture for us is about understanding how we can improve our overall leakage calculation. So although we have mass smart metering on the horizon, by the end of AMP8, we're going to have a quarter of our households smart metered here in the Northwest and all of our non-households. We know that there is potential to do more with our leakage calculation between now and then. And no doubt that smart meter data will give us a better clarity around household and non-household demand. And there is definite opportunities that Paradigm is helping highlight to us, and more importantly, evidence that means we can make short-term improvements to our leakage calculation. Okay, that's enough from me.
Thank you very much. So just before we go to break, I'm just going to talk a little bit about implementing Paradigm and what you need to do to be able to implement Paradigm. So effectively, Paradigm is built at DMA level. So the first building block is that you need to have DMAs. So which is great in the UK because we have most of the water companies have got very high DMA coverage. Obviously, for some of the international water companies you might be watching, you might be in a position where you've got much more open networks. And without that segmented area that we can say, this is how much water should be going in, then we can't build that analysis. However, we have been talking to some companies who are in the process of implementing DMAs, and obviously there's an opportunity there as you bring areas online. If you had a tool like Paradigm that was able to say, well, here's what should be happening, then it allows you to validate those areas and get them right from the start. The key data sets are relatively straightforward. So we need time series data from the outlet meters and any logged large users going into the area. We need to know the properties that are assigned, and so how many household properties are assigned and what their postcodes are, and the build volumes for any non-households. We don't take build data from households, we actually build up using open source census data to categorize properties and to say this is how much and this is the shape of a volume that we should be seeing from an individual property. So we try and keep things as light touch as possible in that element. So we're not bringing lots of different data sources, because the more data we bring in, the more complicated it gets, the harder it is for analysts to kind of see where the picture's coming from, what things are doing. And the more we create a bit of an echo chamber where we're reinforcing things with data that may or may not be right. And the last bit is DMA polygons. So how can we use external data sets of things like local council to say when school term dates should be, to help us understand how profiles should be changing throughout the year. And also things like Ramadan. So you'd be amazed at how much Ramadan changes based on sunset and sunrise times, and you'd be amazed how much the sunrise time changes as we go from east to west across the UK. in terms of a typical timeline for setting up, so I've used South West as an example. So we spoke to them at the leakage conference back in December. In January, we got the project defined, data definition, and the commercial set up. February, March, our team then worked through and ran the whole historical data. And then we started a process with them in April and July to do a trial to see how Paradigm would fit within their leakage teams and their processes. And we've learned loads of lessons from that. You'd be amazed that, considering we've been working with 6 other water companies for the past 2 years, every time we implement something new and we look at something different, there's always something that we find that needs a bit more work. And now we're moving on with them into a company-wide rollout. So how do we make sure it lands with the right teams and get that process? We'll be starting that in August. And we do the analysis across the whole company right from the start. So back at the end of back in April, their leakage teams have got this picture that says, well, yeah, here's where things are and here's where the problems are. And we can start cherry picking some of the good examples outside of the trial. Okay, we're now going to take a break. So we're going to have 15 minutes. So that'll take us to about 11:15. And then we'll come back and we're going to talk a bit around some of the lessons that we've learned. We'll move into Q&A. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to just talk a little bit about some of the lessons that we've learned from this project, and then we'll go to Q&A. So if you've got any more questions to add in, get them into the comments. Oh.
Yeah, so we're all just going to take us through some lessons learned that we've gone through basically for the whole project. From a staff perspective, one thing that we found really helpful and really good in this project that should be brought forward into a project, and I think it is, and made better as we go forward, is throughout this project we've done really well at showing continuous improvement, and through the group project we've developed transparency and openness to find and tackle problems, and a real willingness to adapt and change solutions based on the needs. So at the start we went through the first iteration, it was good, it did some things, and we said actually we wanted to be able to do this and this as well, and Stuart and the team were really open to that, and a load of people said that in the videos that we went through earlier as well. We said, oh, it should have this, it should have this. If you improve the household model, that's what we think you'd focus on. That's, you know, that's one thing we went through in the user groups we've had a lot, which is where do you want us to take it? That's what Stuart asked us. He said we could go down one of 10 avenues. Which one do you want us to focus on first? Because that's the one we'll do. So it's a real group buy-in, and that's what we've really seen. And on top of that, the long-term commitment to improvements. So we're halfway through the project, 18 months in from the South West perspective anyway. 18 months left, and basically improving down the line. So again, at each user group we sit down and Stuart takes us through, this is where we are now, this is what's coming out at the next stage, this is what's coming out at the stage after that. A bit like an Apple, different versions coming out every time, but you already know what's coming as you go down the line. And that's good, it helps us plan and helps us sit in front of our directors and say, this is what's coming, this is what we're doing now, this is what's coming in the future, and it should really help us. But at the same time, if we see something on that route map and we realise there's a problem, or we realise that something can change and be altered to make it even better, they're not wedded to that plan. They're very much adaptable to how we want to do it, and I think that's a key part of some of these projects. You can have an idea and you can just stick through it and not change, or you can be adaptable and flexible and listen to the people you're working with, and that's what we've done really well through this, I think, and we want to keep doing it. And I'll pass on to Courtney.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how do you engage the right teams across the business and create accountability. But just reiterating what Phil said, the fact that we can shape the project and that you're part of this is such a great experience. But also it can have an impact on engagement, both positive and negative. So there's often an initial aversion to change, especially when you're doing working with operational teams. Some people are always eager to highlight when, in this instance, Paradigm doesn't work as opposed to the 9 times out of 10 where it did. You always have 1 or 2 people, but if they are quite influential people, it can be quite hard to overcome objections. I think particularly when we were doing trials last year and we were taking this out to our first operational team, people are almost quick to want something to fail in some strange ways. But actually that trial taught us a lot, and now we're rolling it out across all of our operational teams. We've learned a lot, and we're doing things slightly differently, and the response has been much more positive in terms of engagement and openness. So things can, with something like this, also kind of scale, it can be a bit of a slow burner at first, until you get some kind of core people, whether they're particularly influential or they are most kind of critical to the project. Particularly I'm thinking of leakage analysts and our network performance managers. Once they're believers in it and they can see the benefit, that often has a ripple effect and a positive wave to other roles, and interest seems to grow. So from an engagement point of view, we're systematically targeting key roles as we kind of build that wave of support for Paradigm at United Utilities. And what's really nice to see is that Paradigm is starting to become a common language. Although we're predominantly using it to target and drive leakage performance, actually, does our DMA make sense, or does this DMA make sense, should be the first question you're asking when we're looking at any sort of operational issue. So we're trying to expand this to our network teams and then wider across the business. Although you do also get a little bit of aversion that some people don't want to know that they've got problems. If that problem wasn't already causing them pain or a headache, they don't want to necessarily know that that DMA doesn't make sense. But ultimately, in the long term, the right thing to do is to understand our DMAs, and then we can act with more confidence and manage our water network to a much better level. Can't underestimate, I think, the constant need to engage with people, especially when maybe we don't necessarily have all of the solutions yet in place to solve all of these new problems that we're presenting people. So when we're talking about that there's lots of different potential physical and data integrity issues that might be at play, it's really hard to highlight something but then not give them a solution, whether that be data or a report or a process that allows them to then go fix that problem. So that's our next phase of engagement is how do we put all those things in place so we can move forward and not just get the benefits of targeting the right DMAs with our detection resource, but move towards that fleet of 5-star DMAs. I think the biggest challenge is going to be gaining wider business support. I think that becomes a bit more challenging because sometimes we'll need other parts of the business to support us to resolve problems, and that might not necessarily be a particular priority for them. So yeah, it's a journey supporting a project like this to ensure you're getting that engagement and continue to drive it forward. I think that's it from me.
Thank you. So there's two kind of key areas. I think one of the challenges that we've had is around how we keep the balance. So put up on there tools, people and process. So what we kind of initially started with was this idea, well, we'll create this fantastic tool that'll be really easy to use and it'll be really intuitive and you just roll it out and it all works. But obviously the more you kind of go through and try and get that change right, we've been trying to get that, we need to get that balance across the tools, the people that are using it, and then making sure that process is right. So we've created, as you saw in the video, a simple user interface so analysts can log on, they can see what's happening in DMA, they can see how their DMAs are changing, and it flags up when things need to change. And the challenge with that is that there's always more data to try and fit into that user interface. There's always something else that we want to include, an extra bit of data to put on the graph. And how do we keep that balance right? So how do we keep it as simple and effective as possible so people can get to the pieces of data that they need? And how do we stop it getting drawn into it'd be really good if it interface with our job management system. It'd be really good if we could have all these extra features on there. What if we could see a map that did all these extra things? That kind of just makes things more cumbersome. And yeah, that attempt to try and create one solution that does everything is something we've been trying to avoid as much as possible. And we seem to get a lot of support from the water companies in that. In terms of people, I think that over the past 5 years, there's been a lot of this idea in the industry that we're going to have this AI solution that's going to come in, and suddenly there'll be an AI solution in the background that'll be doing analyst jobs for them, that'll be monitoring our network in real time, we'll be opening valves and moving water around the network. There'll be all these little robots that swim down the pipes and fix leak for us. And whilst these might be reasonable ideas, they're a long way away from being there. And to get to that point, we need to We need to go through a lot of there's a lot of hurdles to cross before we get to that point. So what we've tried to do is just to look at how can we make sure that the analysts stay at the core of what we're doing. How can we make sure that their skills and knowledge is where it wants to be, and make sure they've got the job satisfaction. Make sure that where we have got really skilled people, really good technicians, etc., we're sending them into the areas. We're doing the right solution in the right place and making the most of that. And as Courtney mentioned before, we do have a challenge as an industry of that turnover. One of the things we see in analyst roles is that if people are really, really good at the job, they get cherry picked to go and do something else, whether that's they get promoted and they become a manager, or they move up to be a technical specialist, or someone from wastewater comes in and poaches them and they end up over that side of the business. So we do have this turnover, and a lot of the bigger water companies, that's encouraged. They want people to move around their business. They want them to take those skills and that knowledge and share it across wider areas of the business. So we need to make sure that the training that we're putting in place and the tools that are there are available, and we can upskill people and get them into where we need them as quickly as possible. Process has been a particular challenge for us because we're now working across 7 different water companies. Everyone has their own processes, their own internal systems, their own ways of doing things. So trying to keep that as simple as possible. And on the project, we haven't got the time and the energy to go into every water company and say, how do we integrate with your process? So we've been trying to keep things as light touch as possible, but then making sure it lands. So lots of things still to improve on that one, I think, but something definitely to make sure we're thinking about as we're developing solutions. It leads me into talking about better business transformation. I think as an engineer, it's not something that I would previously have thought of at the start of the project. So we were focused on how do we get the right solution, and maybe a bit of naivety to think, well, if we can create this perfect tool that's really intuitive and everyone wants to use it, then you don't need to think about business transformation. You just kind of drop it in there and everyone will pick it up and use it. And Courtney made some good points there about some of the challenges. But part of that is looking at, as an industry, how can we do stuff? And we were fortunate there was an Institute of Water presentation earlier in the year, which I saw from the guys at Anglian, and they were talking about business transformation, some lessons learned, some really good stuff that we've been trying to feed in around where communications come from, how you make sure the right people within your organisation are telling the analysts and the users the information they need, so they get the right picture on where things should come from. So making sure we're engaging with those people in the right way. One of the key things we've been trying to do is make sure we get some tangible benefits. So Paradigm's looking at an entire company, and the advantage of that is that we can go and we can cherry pick. We can look and say, here's an example of a DMA where it looks quite similar to one we did last year in Severn Trent, and we got a really good leakage benefit from that. So you know what, let's get on this, because if we can build that case study, then we can then use that to show to people within the organisation, say, well, we had this one and we found half a mega leakage in that one. Fantastic. The reality is you don't find half a mega leakage in all your DMAs, but having a couple of good wins and good case studies. And I think it also helps from a benefits case. If then when senior stakeholders are saying, well, where are our benefits? If you've got a couple of pin-ups of good benefits that you can show, you can then say, well, you know what, the project's already paid for itself here in these 2-3 DMAs, and we're still going on the rest. So it makes it a lot easier, I think, to make sure those senior stakeholders come on board. As Courtney mentioned, building champions. We've got a really good team, and our guys, we've been doing this for sort of 3 years in terms of Paradigm, so we know it inside out, but we can't be everywhere. We need to have those champions in the water companies who will understand exactly what Paradigm's doing, understand what it's good at, understand what it's not so good at. So when all their users are saying, well, this DMA is a bit rubbish, it doesn't really work here, they can say, well, yeah, this is why it's not working. You know what, that component's not quite there yet, but that's in the roadmap. Come back in December and actually know what that bit's going to be there. But it still tells you all this information, and make sure there's a kind of a positive voice there in the background, making sure that everyone's on board. Okay, so Leah's going to join us and we're going to go to questions. you have got any more questions, then do put them in the chat. None too difficult ones because we've got time to prep for those. But we have been having a look at the ones that have come in throughout the break.
So as Stuart said, we're going to go into the Q&A now. So we've had a couple of questions that have come in privately and a few through the chat. If you do think of any more questions while we're doing this session, please do continue to keep putting them in the chat and we'll make sure to try and answer them. Okay, so first question was from Gerald. It's a bit of a comment / question, so if you need me to repeat any bits, let me know. So Gerald says, the system appears to be very dependent on assigning diurnal flows to each individual use type and meter, which can really only be fully done when each customer meter is a smart meter sending back diurnal flows. I know we can log housing estates and industrial estates, but these only give an estimated profile. Can you talk a little bit more about this, please? I did a pilot with each consumer meter coming in at 1 hour intervals in 2006. 1 or 2 leaks influenced the full MNF dramatically.
So the way we do it within Paradigm is that we've built standard household profiles that are then assigned. So we've got 12 different profiles, and then we use the census data to then adjust those profiles based on occupancy information and also look at other factors to decide which type of profile should go with which house. So for example, is it a semi-detached property or is it a terraced house? Is it a little old lady living on her own or is it a young family? And actually that open source census data is so rich. You can look at a postcode and you can tell, it'll tell you the age breakdown in 5-year bands of the occupants in that area. So we're doing that analysis at postcode. Those standard profiles have been built using the flow data that you mentioned, Gerald, on the so individual household monitors and cul-de-sac monitors from the water companies. And because we're building that up, we've then got 15,000 DMAs across all the water companies that we can then run that through and see whether we're getting a good match. And we're doing that last summer. We had a different model that was running last summer. And one of the key things that came out of the examples from the water companies was we were having DMAs where it just didn't fit very well. So we took 6 months out and kind of redid the model and got that right, ready for a second trial and a second rollout. And that's really improved things in the fit that we're seeing.
Great, thank you, Stuart. And then Rob had a question too. So he wants to say, first of all, really insightful presentation. So thank you to the team. And he's curious to know how weather effects on demand are accounted for in the models. And leading on from this, I wonder if there's any follow-on plans to apply the work to demand forecasting.
Yeah. So at the moment, we don't do any demand forecasting based on the weather data. The team have just implemented in the last week an adjustment factor that looks at what happened last week. And so for example, at the end of June, where we had a particular short spell with hot weather, we can then look at that and adjust that and say, well, that household profile, we would expect it within a reasonable tolerance of confidence to move up this amount. And that's a relatively new implementation. So before that, it was adjusting for things like school holidays, bank holidays, etc. But we saw some interesting behaviour this Easter. So if you remember, Easter in the UK was fairly miserable and poor. It was wet and cold, whereas last Easter we saw really hot, nice weather. So we had a real peak around Easter last year, and we used that to forecast this year, and it didn't work very well. So we're taking those lessons as we go through and improving the model in terms of stuff. Got lots of aspirations for what we want to do next and things, but as Phil said, we keep on going to these user groups and the water companies say, yeah, it'd be nice if it did that, but get this bit right first. So it's on the plan, but not quite at the top of the pecking.
Wasn't quite a hot priority just yet.
No.
Great. Okay. So how far in advance can it predict kind of demand modelling?
So we forecast the demand for the whole year.
Oh.
So that takes into account things like school holidays, Ramadan behaviour. So we bring in at the start of the project 3 years worth of historical data for each DMA, and we're using that to then forecast through. The team have just developed a new model as well, which uses machine learning to look at larger logged non-household customers. So if we're missing data for them, we can then use that to forecast. So within the user interface, we forecast for a week, and then we're using our analysis is really focused on what happened last week and what should the analysts be taking from that information and how can they make decisions.
Great, thank you. Okay, great. So Anna wants to ask, do you only use flows and not pressure data?
Or you can take that.
Oh, not me.
Chaps.
Yes, is the answer.
Yeah, I was not what else I can say other than yes.
But that's a great segue, Anna, because actually we only use flows at the moment, but we're looking to start a new club project, which will start in October. So we're spoken to a couple of water companies, which will be looking at how we can do the same for pressure and then build some of that pressure data in to look at how pressure affects leakage, but then also some of the demand factors as well. So yeah, so if anyone's interested in joining a new club project starting in October, I will be doing that alongside this one.
And Stuart will pay you later, Anna.
Brilliant. Anna also wanted to ask, how do you deal with DMA boundary changes? What a DMA is now can be quite different than 2 years ago.
I'll tell you. I guess that's every quarter we run an update that we'll send out with our, I guess, a massive property file that says these properties are in that DMA and these were the ABCs if they're not household, or this is the acorn top we gave you before, now it moves on to census data. Basically every quarter we're sending an update that says these are our boundary updates and these are our property changes, that new housing estate's been built over there, another 50 properties have come online over there, and they get slowly built up over time. So, and it's something that we're starting to look at now as staff as well. So we've got, we don't do DMA level leakage reporting, so we've got quite a swathe of areas that aren't properly built as DMAs, they're just sort of semi-built. And that's something that we're going to look to start bringing online now. That's one of the new challenges for us in terms of if we get them into Paradigm early before we've even really set them up properly, can they be tracked all the way through, as Stuart said earlier? So, and that'll be a case of, well, how do we build a DMA profile off something that didn't have a DMA profile off in the past? So it's one of the challenges that we're looking at. But given that it builds it up from the ground up, it should be quite straightforward, but I guess we'll find out as we go forward.
Mm-hmm.
So we're slightly different at United Utilities. We feed in GIS changes every day, and then once a month we bring updated property counts and billing and all of that good stuff into our leakage reporting system. So your boundary changes can pose quite a challenge. Sometimes something that might be done temporarily out in the field then becomes a little less temporary, and then GIS boundaries don't get updated. So if we had, say, a DMA that was 5-star, it'd been proven against the model, so that profiled demand for the DMA matched nicely with the net flow, and then we had changes out in the field and that they didn't filter through into GIS, we would get a prompt because that DMA will probably fall into an integrity work stream. So we would almost see those changes, then think something's happened. What is that? So in a way, this is almost helping us close that circle of our GIS changes, our changes in the field actually translating to GIS changes, and are we keeping our data that's vital to our leakage calculation up to date? So it's actually a really good way of closing the circle, because sometimes you can have that miscommunication, or something that was meant to be temporary ends up being 12 months, a year and a half. And obviously, if those boundaries aren't correct, your property counts will be wrong, your demand feeding through into your leakage reporting system would be wrong. So yeah, it's actually, I think, having the weekly work stream and having that prompt that something has changed on your network is only a good thing, because it helps us close the circle in a lot of scenarios.
And when we did our most recent 3-monthly update, we had a few of those examples. So we'd split a DMA in half, but the property file hadn't been updated. Therefore, the GIS bit that they got said there's only 100 properties in here. The property file said there was 500. Flows and demands didn't match up properly across the model, and we had vice versa as well, where it's split a DMA apart. So when we first get that update, it's a check through: are there 5 here that are wrong? And then you go and speak to your network colleagues, or you just know in your head because you know something happened, but it wasn't updated. So yeah, it's just that other check, isn't it? It's another layer to add to your check-in to say, is this correct? And it's quick and easy.
And at the moment in the project, when you move your DMAs up through the star rating, you get them to a 5-star. At the moment, you don't ever downgrade them. So once you prove the DMA, it stays at a 5-star. But actually, going back to the whole piece of we're shaping the project, we're having that debate of, well, how long, if it deviates in terms of its current performance away from where you had it in that sweet spot, that proven place, how long do you let that happen for before you say, well, is this still a proven DMA, or do we need to move it back down in its star rating? So all of that kind of good stuff gets shaped through the user groups and the discussions we have as a collective.
Great, so they feed really nicely to each other then in that sense. Yeah, nice. Great, thank you. Okay, so question from Ellen, who wants to know, census data is refreshed every 10 years or so. How does this stay relevant in the model over that time?
Good question. So we're very fortunate that we sort of had a 2021 census. So we've got lots of relevant data, and we don't really know how we're going to make sure that it stays relevant in reality. The hope is that as you get new properties come online, you can start to look at what's coming through. There are open source data sources that tell us about what's planned, etc. And as things come online through GIS systems, etc., then we can start to pick up on things. The advantage of the way we're doing things in Paradigm is that if an area starts to drift, then we'll start to pick that up. So we'll be able to see what's going differently. So where you've got examples of new build properties coming through, we haven't got an approach at the moment of how do we assign types and things to those properties. And actually we had some really good examples from last year of you seeing newer build properties that are coming in, and some of these are like bigger 4 or 5 bedroom properties, but they're properties where you've got 4 or 5 en suites and 2 family bathrooms in these properties. So you've potentially got kind of 5 or 6 people having showers in a morning at the same time. So actually the shapes of the profiles and what we're seeing can be really different. So I think the answer to that is we don't know all the answers, but we're kind of, as the project goes on, we're going to have to keep on learning and keep on adapting and keep on improving. Obviously open to other data sets. If people have got other data sets that they're using that they'd like to kind of recommend, that'd be really good. There are sort of commercially available models on the market, and I think they face the same challenges. I'm not sure that there's a kind of an easy answer to that one. But yeah, do reach out if you've got any innovation ideas. We'd really like to talk.
Amazing. I know obviously there's an organisation at the minute called Stream who are all about kind of building open data sets to enable that kind of collaboration between multiple companies. Is that something you can see yourself contributing to in terms of leakage?
Yeah, so it's something that came up at the last user group. So the water companies are looking to share 10% of the net flows for their DMAs. But one of the challenges for water companies is that they want to, I think part of the requirement is that it has to be validated beforehand, so they're not just sharing data that's maybe there's data problems and stuff in. So the advantage of the Paradigm is that we've got all the DMAs in there. We've got a validation that's running in the background that says whether we can trust that data. So we had some conversations, I think with the team at Yorkshire Water and a couple of others around, well, how could we fit into that? Because actually you've got some of the bigger water companies there who've got this challenge of how do we consistently share that data. So yeah, so if there's anyone from Stream, I have messaged Stream, and if there's anyone from Stream who wants to reach out to us, then it'd be relatively easy for us to set up a standard way of sharing across these water companies. That'll probably save a lot of time and energy for a lot of people.
Brilliant, thank you. Great, so Billy wanted to ask, how do you adjust your household consumption figures to account for regional differences in water usage?
What was that?
Yeah, that's new.
Yeah,
That's an SME question.
So one of the real challenges we had at the beginning of the project was people saying, well, surely East Anglia, people don't use water in the same way that they do up in the northwest. And what we've found as we've gone through the project, that actually a lot of sectors of population do use water in the same way. So it's very similar, and we're getting the same behaviours. I think the earlier question about temperature and rainfall and some of those challenges, that's when things start to come in and we start to see differences in terms of behaviour. One of the other things is sort of areas where you've got second homes. So I was surprised, maybe I should have been surprised to discover that Norfolk has the highest concentration of second homes in the UK. So when you see some of the behaviours and some of the profiles that you've got in there, trying to understand why is that area so different? But then when you compare it to South West Water, where we just started implementing a Paradigm over the past 6 months, you're starting to see the same behaviours and people doing the same things. I think there's a lot more complexity that could be there, but a lot of the benefit we're getting is just putting, here's a sort of simple expected behaviour, and here's where it might be varying. And what we need to be a little bit careful of, I think, is making those model profiles and paradigm too complicated, because we've got that balance of, I've got a brand new analyst who doesn't understand anything about leakage. We've got to get them up to speed. We've got to get them trained up. We've got them understanding how people are using water. And then if the model that sits behind paradigm is too complicated, then you've lost them before you begun. They haven't got a chance of understanding it, so they probably won't try.
I think for me, the fact that it's simple is one of the big wins. Simple, and the fact that it's similar characteristics. So one of the big wins for us from at South Staffs when we decided to do this project was that we're only a small company. We've got 543 DMAs, 540 DMAs. You've got 3,000.
Yep.
Trent have got, again, I'm quoting numbers. Trent have got roughly 3,000. Anglian have got roughly 3,000. So we're all about the same size, and we're tiny. But to get all that learning from the others was such a big piece, and was a reason why we wanted to be involved. South Staff sits bang in the middle of Severn Trent's region. Our Cambridge Water region sits bang in the middle of Anglian's region, basically. So we can get so much learning from those much bigger areas. And a DMA that's on our boundary, there's a DMA here that's on the boundary of Severn Trent. They're right next to each other. They've got the exact same profile because they're brand new housing estates. They just happen to be in different water companies, and you can get the learning across both.
So it's been particularly valuable for South Staffs, the collaboration.
In that way,
yeah, absolutely. Great, thank you. So, Courtney, a hot topic in the sector at the moment is how we can scale at pace. So, can you tell us more about how you view our scaling?
I can. So we went from last year doing a trial in one particular operational area, which taught us a lot of things that we would not do when we scale at pace. Particularly the fact that we focus very heavily on one role, and actually you need several roles within that local operational team to all be brought in. So now we've gone from trialing in one area to let's roll it out across all of the areas all at once. So in terms of like scaling at pace, I think there's that balance between people want to get going and they want the benefits, and they want the benefits yesterday, versus this is an innovation project. We've gone from it didn't exist to in an amazing place 18 months in. We've still got 18 months to go. So some people struggle with the idea of working in an innovation project where it's not finalized, it's not finished, it doesn't work 100% of the time, and then others love that. So there's always that balance of you need to, no matter what you kind of target audience is, whatever role they do, whatever part they play, win the hearts and minds of people and bring them along with you. And what works in one area might not work exactly the same in the next operational team or the next area or the next water company. So I think scaling at pace, you just have to be careful you're not going too fast or too slow, and that you're tailoring your approach to the individual audience, and it's not necessarily one size fits all. But the beauty paradigm is that one size does fit all, because as Phil said, it's intuitive. The user interface, when you look at it, it's really engaging. So it's, for me, like the response has generally been really positive, and people just want to get going with it, and they're already chomping at the bit, which is great. It's not been as hard a sell as I thought it was going to be going out with the operational teams. But I also think more industry-wide, it's great that we are coming together as in projects like this. Sometimes people stand in their own way. So, making data available or getting around data security and processes and actual company politics to just get going with these things. Sometimes there's quite a lot of inertia at the start of a project where you can see the benefits. But for me, Paradigm is one of a couple of projects I'm working on where I can really see that this is going to make a step change for us. So that's really exciting. And I think once people are bought into that, it makes it a lot easier to let the project gain momentum.
Yeah, I guess. So considering target audience at all times is kind of really key to being able to move at that pace. Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Question from Norman, who wants to know, can you tell us anything else about the model? How exactly does it use AI/machine learning?
You want to say that?
No, it doesn't use AI.
So if our technical director would be able to blow you out with details. A lot of it, what we try to do is to keep it as simple as possible. So the household profiles doesn't use machine learning. We've done some offline analysis. We've built standard profiles, which we're then adjusting and looking at stuff. So that base is there. The new pieces that we've started implementing over the past few months have started to introduce some machine learning. So we did have a presentation at the user group. I can't remember the names of the types of machine learning it uses. But for example, our new non-household continuously logged user model. So this is where we've got 50-minute data coming in for individual properties, typically larger users who have erratic behaviour. The new model looks back over the past 6 weeks worth of data, and uses one of 4 machine learning algorithms, which I can't quote, and it uses the historical data to identify what the best fit. So if I was going to predict that DMA, which of these algorithms would give me the best fit, it then tags that with it. And then if that property drops out in terms of available data, it'll then use that specific machine learning algorithm to infill what's there. But that's then balanced with the other parts of the profile. So it's then with the standard household stuff and the non-household stuff. So we're starting to introduce machine learning stuff. It's not something I'm very keen on wholesale, because we've got that risk that suddenly the whole profile changes. And as an analyst, what we want people to do is to be able to look at it and go, well, it's not perfect, but I can see why it's not perfect because this DMA is slightly different. Whereas as soon as we make that profile match exactly, then you've lost that understanding of where things have come from. So I think there's challenges for the project over the next 18 months of how do we keep the brakes on some of those more exciting developments that the guys upstairs are coming up with that allow us to really get really good matches on these and get some insights. But then also there's a lot of really positive insights. So actually, what if you could know what happened at the end of June for 3 days when consumption profiles went up? What happens if you could pick that out and say, well, you know what, this postcode over here, they changed, and this is why they changed? Because from a water efficiency and a PCC reporting perspective, that would be really powerful, because you'd then be able to go, well, actually, you know what, if all those people had water butts, and that's 3% of my population, then we'd be able to save X amount of water, because they'd all, and particularly in the northwest, my water butts are always full. So so it's useful to have, because you know that's water that's then not going to be taken from the tap.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the benefits of how this could be used as insight for PCC, per capita consumption, is really a bit maybe we've not tapped into fully yet. But as we move into AMP8, actually there's business drivers that mean non-household, household PCC plus leakage are quite evenly on the same playing field, whereas maybe in the past we've perhaps focused more on leakage. So there's even more insights which we can kind of glean, and another application, I guess, for Paradigm within our businesses.
Yeah.
Amazing, thank you all. You mentioned earlier, Courtney, the physical and data integrity. Can you explain a bit more what you meant by that?
Yeah, so I think I was talking about we might have DMAs that we say are operable, so they're calculating a leakage figure, but a calculated leakage figure versus actually a level of physical leakage may be different for some DMAs, because of the things we talked about previously. So for us, we've got a number of DMAs that actually Paradigm's highlighting, or you've got some unobvious issues there, things that might be long-standing. So things that we would say would be a physical integrity issue, and most people automatically think, oh, you're talking about boundary breach. So when I talked earlier about the water network being a jigsaw puzzle of connected but defined pieces, most people will think, oh, you've got a breach between two pieces, so you must have water mixing, for example. But physical integrity could be to do with is your inlet or outlet meters under recording, over recording? Do you have a problem with your logging equipment? And then moving more onto the data integrity side of things, that could be anything from your GIS plans not being correct, maybe the actual boundary of your DMA not being correct. So you might have too many properties, too few properties. It could be things like housing developments or redevelopment, where you've got water being used, but those properties aren't making their way into your billing system yet, so therefore they're not making it into your leakage regulatory reporting system. It could be, what else we've got from a data integrity point of view, scaling issues on your logger. So you might look like you're using more or less water. So yeah, the whole idea of integrity helps us understand actually are there things at play that mean that DMA doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So for us, we're getting presented with these new issues that maybe weren't obvious, we didn't know we had. And now we need to go and target them so we can say, yes, that DMA makes sense. The water we expect to be being used in that DMA there isn't too much, there isn't too little, because you've got to have a baseline, otherwise you can't manage your network.
And I think that helps with the buying as well. So you talked about winning hearts and minds. And you say that we don't know the issues, but you speak to people who work on the ground and they go, I've been saying that for years. I've been saying that for years. Or even the analyst looks at the data and says, I don't trust that data, but I've got to go with it.
Yeah. Because I've got nothing else.
Because I've got nothing else. I've got to go and do this and this or that. But now it's a case of, and we're getting more and more to the point of, well, actually, it's that exact issue. It's gone into those 4 work streams, and within those work streams, I can put it there. And, most of the time it's, yeah, we knew that, I've been, even though we've been unable to flow test that meter for 5 years because of where it is, and you can see it's been slowly degrading, and that's those sort of issues that have been highlighted. So that's where it's supporting us and helping us as well. Again, it goes all back to winning hearts and minds and things.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, great. So, Stuart, what are the sort of next steps for Paradigm? What do you see yourself working on in the next 18 months?
So I think we've got that challenge that we need to get right in terms of how we keep things simple. One of the things we're talking to some of the water companies about is smart metering. So we've got this challenge of, we've got all this smart meter data coming on, and there's an idea that Paradigm might be completely redundant in a couple of years' time, because suddenly we'll be able to do these mass balances on DMAs. We'll be able to say, here's how much water's going in, it's all smart metered, it all comes out. And looking at some of the initial data that some of the water companies have got, it doesn't seem to quite work like that. So there's this challenge of, how do you take all that data in? How do you process all that when you suddenly got millions and millions of data points arriving every hour onto your system, and the challenges of kind of different water companies. So I think there'll always be a relevance there, because there'll always be these data problems, there'll always be properties that are missing from that system, there'll always be those things. So trying to look at how do we integrate all that kind of new data and things and get that balance.
Brilliant. And so there's been like a lot of talk about how simple it is to use for whoever you are in the company. Do you kind of offer any sort of training or support packages with the implementation of Paradigm at all?
Yeah, so our team go in and support with trials and with the training, but the key focus that we've had is on the Paradigm Academy throughout the project. And initially that was about, well, how do we make sure that our team don't have to travel across to Anglian Water from the northwest of England every time a new analyst appears, because we haven't got the time to do that, we haven't got the resource, we can't afford to do that. So we started building this academy. And that academy is actually getting really powerful. Rich and our team's been doing lots of work on that. But that takes you from what a DMA is, as kind of initial, that kind of point, to, well, what's leakage on the network? And we're continuing to add more modules that explain exactly how Paradigm builds up its household consumptions. When we then get this on account for water, how as an analyst should you be looking at that? What does that look like? And then we're going to continue to add more stuff around kind of different leakage investigation techniques and really try and make it a hub for all things leakage. So anybody coming in as an analyst into role, somebody suddenly says, oh, well, we could go and step test that DMA. You kind of think, well, what does that mean? How do we go? What does a step test mean? How do we get that information in? But then how can we use the water companies that are involved in the project to say, well, what's the best practice for that? If I want to go and step test the DMA, which people don't know, is when we go and start closing valves to isolate sections to see if we can work out where our unaccounted for water is, typically done at night. What's best practice for that? And how should people be doing risk assessments for it? How should they be undertaking the work at night? How do we record information when we're out on site, so that as when you come back, you've got evidence that there's, well, this is what we did. And then also, how do you put that somewhere so that when someone comes back next week and says, well, we should go and step test that DMA, you say, well, we did that last week and we didn't find what we wanted to do, so maybe we need to put some acoustic loggers out, or maybe we need to do something different.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like you've got absolutely everything when it comes to making it as simple as possible for everybody in the business, really. So brilliant, thank you. Okay, so how challenging has it been to implement Paradigm across different water companies with such different data sources?
I think it has been hard. I think the challenge is that yes, every water company has they have different corporate systems, they have different GIS systems. South Staffs have got a GIS system for Cambridge and then another one for South Staff Water. So trying to kind of bring that all together can be challenging. I think one of the things that I've been really surprised at, well, and maybe I shouldn't have been, is the support we've had from other organisations. So we've talked about the kind of the collaboration between us and the water companies, and I think it's obvious because we've got a vested interest of building a commercial product. We need the support from the water companies. The water companies have got a problem to solve. But we've had a lot of support from Halma, who've been on the journey since the beginning with us in terms of providing data to us, getting that set up, making that as easy as possible for us. We rolled out South West Water. Part of the reason why we've been so quick at South West Water is because they use RPS's tool WaterNet, which is the same as South Staff's used. So we've actually, a lot of the processes were set up, and the team at RPS, thanks to Mike earlier if you're watching, have been really supportive in terms of setting up standard scripts and things. So we've said, these are the pieces of information we need for Paradigm. So we've now got standard scripts that can be rolled out to any client who's got WaterNet to then allow Paradigm just to sit on the back of it. So that makes it really light touch for us from an implementation perspective. So that's been really positive.
Brilliant, amazing. Well, we have just reached 12 p.m, so that brings us to the end of the session. I just want to say thank you so much to our presenters for all the hard work that's gone into today's presentation. I think it's been really, really interesting and engaging one, and you've covered a lot of things that I think will be really valuable to our audience. So thank you so much for that. I want to say thank you to the audience as well for taking time out of your days today to come and join us. We hope you have found it valuable. My colleague here will be launching a poll in the chat really shortly. It's a little bit different to our usual poll as we've had some technical issues. So you may need to follow a link to go to it, but it's just a very short poll. If you could give an answer for us, it's really great, really helps us kind of shape these showcases as we move forward and make sure they're really valuable for our audiences. So yeah, thank you again to everybody that's joined us today, both presenters and audience, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.